Hello everyone, I'm here with another video. Today's video will be, what if Warner Brothers made a Spider-Man movie? And I know a lot of you are going to say, but it would have basically been your way if Spider was the first superhero movie in 1978 instead of Superman video. No, I'm going to do something different. It'll be Batman. The first movie would be Spider-Man in 1989. This would be an origin story for Spider-Man. Now, who could I see playing Spider-Man? I don't think Michael Keaton would have been a good Spider-Man. I could see maybe Matthew Broderick as Spider-Man. In terms of love interest, this would be Mary Jane, who I could possibly see being played by maybe Mia Sara or someone like that. Or Kim Basinger, I don't know. As for Aunt May, she would be played by, I think Rosemary Harris could have still played Aunt May. Or maybe Maggie Smith. I'm not too sure who would have been the definitive choice. J. Jonah Jameson would also appear, and I would have Stan Lee play him. And of course, Billy D. Williams would be Robbie Robertson. Harry would also appear, and I could see Michael J. Fox as Harry. And of course, the Green Goblin would be the main villain, Norman Osborn. And I could definitely see Jack Nicholson as Green Goblin. Now, apparently, at some point, I would say when Green Goblin Norman is being attacked by criminals, Spider-Man saves Norman, but however, in the process, something happens that causes the Goblin Serum to engulf the room, and so Spider-Man leaves, but Norman is caught. Soon to be dead, Norman then becomes the Green Goblin, of course. So yeah, it's kind of like the first movie in ways. Also, Uncle Ben would be in this movie, and I could see, I think Cliff Robertson could have still played Uncle Ben, but I could also have seen maybe Sean Connery as Uncle Ben. My issue with Sean Connery as Uncle Ben is that he probably wouldn't have been able to play Uncle Ben due to his commitment to Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade at the time. But I think he would have been a good Uncle Ben. If I couldn't cast him as Uncle Ben, I could see Ed Asner as Uncle Ben. And of course, Captain George Stacy would appear, and I could see the actor who played Sheriff Bracken in Halloween, Charles Cyphers, as Captain Stacy. And this would set up Gwen Stacy to appear in a later film, as she would be mentioned to have been an old friend of Peter. And of course, Green Goblin would die, like in the first Raimi film. So yeah, it's kind of like the first Sam Raimi film with some changes here and there. Next movie is Spider-Man Returns after the success of Spider-Man 89. There would be some new characters. Kingpin would be the main antagonist, and I could definitely see Danny DeVito playing Kingpin. As for a secondary villain, this would be Silvermane, who I could see being played by Lance Henriksen or Marlon Brando, or even Christopher Walken. Black Cat would also appear in. I could possibly see Michelle Pfeiffer as Black Cat. Or maybe even another character. Not a character. Another actress, like maybe the actress who played Ferris Bueller's sister. I don't know. I guess Michelle Pfeiffer could work as Black Cat, since Catwoman is like the DC version of Black Cat. Now, in this movie, it'd be mentioned that Spider-Man and MJ broke up, and Spider-Man's trying to get through the breakup. I would have the beginning of the film, where I'd probably have it happen like during later, probably during the first half, because there's something about MJ and Peter's relationship that proves that they can't be together any longer, and so they break up on good terms. Aunt May would try to help Peter get through the breakup, and so she suggests for Peter to get a new girlfriend. That would be Felicia Hardy. And of course, Kingpin's goal would be to become the only crime lord in New York and become the mayor. And the current crime lord in New York would be Silvermane. His goal would be to overthrow Silvermane for obvious reasons. And of course, it would be established that Silvermane had been responsible for the death of Black Cat's father, Walter Hardy, likely sending a criminal to kill him. This could also be the same man who killed Spider-Man's uncle, Uncle Ben. And then the final battle would, of course, be Spider-Man and Black Cat reluctantly teaming up to stop Kingpin, who has Silvermane hostage. Or it's the other way around, I don't know. But in terms of Chip Shrek, that would be Richard Fisk, who I could see being played by Alan Ruck. In the end, they would manage to stop Kingpin and Silvermane, and they would be arrested. However, Black Cat would leave Spider-Man. And then we end the movie with Black Cat seeing Spider-Man swing off. There would have been plans for a Black Cat spin-off movie, but such plans never come to fruition. On second thought, I could actually see the actress who is going to play MJ in James Cameron's Spider-Man movie as Black Cat, I guess. And I could also see Kate Winslet as Mary Jane. Or Kim Basinger. Never mind. Let's move on to Spider-Man Forever. Now, when it came to casting a new Spider-Man, it was hard, so rather than trying to get a new Spider-Man, I could see Matthew Broderick reprising his role as Spider-Man. Or maybe I could get a new actor with someone like Leonardo DiCaprio, I guess. I'm not. Or Chris O'Donnell or Michael J. Fox. I'm not 100% sure. But there would be a new character introduced. That would be Ben Reilly's Scarlet Spider. Unlike his comic counterpart where he's a clone of Spider-Man, he would be an old friend of Peter. As for who I could see as Ben Reilly, I could see either Hayden Christensen, Leonardo DiCaprio, or even Tobey Maguire as Ben Reilly. And I'd be fine with bringing Matthew back as Spider-Man. For the new love interest of this movie, this would be Liz Allen. Now, Aunt May still is trying to find a new love interest for Spider-Man. Or at least Peter. Because she wants Peter to get a life and have a family. And that's where Liz Allen would come in. And I could see maybe Nicole Kidman as Liz. I could. Now the villains. They would be Hammerhead, who I could see being played by Tommy Lee Jones. And as for Chameleon, I would say maybe Nick Castle or George P. Wilbur. But Basically, Chameleon's whole thing is that in this movie, he's framing Spider-Man for crimes he didn't commit, which leads to Peter often being hidden as Spider-Man, and so he decides to make Ben Reilly, who believes Spider-Man is innocent, his sidekick. And of course, the Chameleon would be a henchman for Tombstone. Not Tombstone, Hammerhead. The final battle would then feature Liz being kidnapped by Chameleon, and then Spider-Man and Scarlet Spider would end up defeating Hammerhead and Chameleon. They would then be both arrested and sent to jail, where they would meet Silvermane and Kingpin. Now, Chameleon may have died like Two-Face. Maybe Chameleon tries to shoot Spider-Man, but since he refuses to get arrested, he just killed himself. I don't know. But he probably would go to jail. And in the end, Spider-Man is relieved of crimes he didn't commit, and so Scarlet Spider is hailed as a hero. 2 years later, we would get Spider-Man 4, the fourth movie in the franchise. That would be Spider-Man and Scarlet Spider. In this movie, we get introduced to a bunch of new characters. Spider-Woman, who I could see being played by Kirsten Dunst or Natalie Portman. But for the new love interest, this would be Gwen Stacy, who I could see being played by Elizabeth Shue, or Sarah Jessica Parker, who is Matthew Broderick's wife in real life. And Charles Cypher's Captain Stacy would decide that Peter would be the perfect choice for Gwen, and Aunt May would agree to the decision to have Peter and Gwen get married. As for the villains, they would be Dr. Octopus, who I could see being played by Bob Hoskins, or maybe Alfred Molina still. Multiman, Hayden Christensen, if it weren't for Scarlet Spider. Him as Scarlet Spider. Shriek, played by Uma Thurman, and Rhino, who I could see being played by Kane Hodder. Or maybe Vin Diesel. And basically, Harry would have been in this movie as well as in Spider-Man Forever. Now, of course, Otto would have been a scientist hired by Harry, who is now in charge of Oscorp. His origin story would be similar to how it was in the Raimi films. And of course, there would be some relationship build up between Ben Reilly and Jessica Drew. And of course, to be revealed that Jessica was bitten by the same spider that bit Ben and Peter. Apparently, Scarlet Spider wants to be his own hero, so he tries to fight Shriek but fails. And of course, at one point in the movie, Gwen is kidnapped by Rhino and Dr. Octopus and taken to the lair. Now, Multiman would be like a villain that's making sure the three heroes don't get to Gwen, and would be a villain seen in the opening, along with Rhino. In the end, the villains would be stopped, and Gwen is saved. Dr. Octopus likely redeems himself, like in Spider-Man 2, and dies. And of course, Rhino, Shriek, and Multiman would be arrested. In the end, Peter and Gwen would decide that it would be for the best to get married. But Peter has other things to do, which then leads to Spider-Man, Scarlet Spider, and Spider-Woman going out to fight crime. Well, there would be plans for Harry to become the Hobgoblin, as he would be seen in his father's lair, finding all the goblin equipment. This would set up a canceled fifth movie called Spider-Man Unchained, which would have seen Peter and Gwen getting married, Harry as the Hobgoblin, with Mysterio as another villain would have been played by Bruce Campbell, and Spider-Man would have relived the past villains in Ravencroft Institute. There would have been rumors that White Rabbit was going to appear, but such rumors were never confirmed. And of course, there would have been plans to include the Lizard, who I could have seen still being played by Dylan Baker. However, the movie ends up canceled in favor of a reboot called Spider-Man Begins. The movie would depict Spider-Man in a more grounded and realistic world. I think Andrew Garfield could have still played Spider-Man. In terms of the villain, this would be Silvermane, who I could see being played by either Liam Neeson or Lance Henriksen. More likely Neeson for reboot's sake. As for what else? Apparently, Spider-Man in this movie would be in college, and of course, some friends of his would be Harry, who I could see still being played by Dane DeHaan, Gwen Stacy, who I could see still being played by Emma Stone, and MJ, who I could see still being played by Shailene Woodley. Silvermane would start as Spider-Man's college teacher, only for it to be revealed that he is a crime lord that's trying to manipulate Spider-Man into becoming his henchman. Now, there would be other villains like Mysterio, played by Bruce Campbell, or someone else like Ralph. Never mind. Bruce Campbell, whereas there would also be Cletus Cassidy, who I could see being played by Heath Ledger. Spider-Man would take down Cletus first, and in terms of Aunt May and Uncle Ben, I think Sally Field could have still played Aunt May, and Michael Sheen could have still played Uncle Ben. And of course, we'd also see J. Jonah Jameson, played by J.K. Simmons, and of course, Robbie Robertson, who I could definitely see being played by Morgan Freeman, who would have been the perfect casting choice. Now, during the final battle, Mysterio would unleash his illusions on all of New York, and Spider-Man has to save people from their illusions and ends up taking down both Silvermane and Mysterio. We'd also get an appearance from Norman Osborn, who I could see being played by Chris Cooper still, or maybe even Billy Crudup, or even Willem Dafoe. Next movie is The Web Slinger. This film would basically start off with how Norman becomes the Green Goblin and killing his scientist. And of course, there would be a secondary antagonist in the form of Hammerhead, who I could see being played by John Cena. And of course, Norman has plans to have Harry marry Gwen Stacy, even though Gwen is a little hesitant at first. Also in this movie, Spider-Man would get the black suit, which would be a creation of Oscorp like in the Ultimate Comics. This also puts a fracture in his relationship with MJ and tries to take Gwen away from Harry. Norman would see all of this and so kidnaps both Gwen and Aunt May, and so gives Spider-Man a choice after he defeats Hammerhead. Save Aunt May or save Gwen. He can't save both. Now, I could also see Captain Stacy, who also would have been in Spider-Man Begins in this movie. And I think Dennis Leary could have still played him, or maybe even James Cromwell. Or I could also see Gary Oldman playing him. I'm not sure. Now, Green Goblin would drop both of Gwen and Aunt May. Spider-Man actually saves Gwen, but fails to save Aunt May. And he almost kills Green Goblin, but stops. And in the end, he gives up the black suit and leaves the bell tower, where he decides to take a break as Spider-Man. And of course, Harry would find the symbiote and then bond with it. Thus setting up the Web Slinger Rises. Now, the plot was meant to follow Spider-Man fighting against the Chameleon, played by Derek Mears. There also would have been rumors of Kingpin, who I could have seen still being played by Vincent D'Onofrio as one of the villains. While the Venom after credits, he was meant to set up a spinoff or something like that. But that would all change when they would decide to make Venom, who I could see still being played by Tom Hardy, and Rhino as the villains, with Rhino being still played by Paul Giamatti. We'd also get Silver Sable, who I could see being played by Cate Blanchett, based on her performance as Irina Spalko in Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and Janice Lincoln's Beetle, who I could see being played by Shailene Woodley, since I changed my mind. Jessica Biel would instead play MJ. Now, there also would have been talks of bringing back Chris Cooper as Norman Osborn. And this movie would also introduce Black Cat, who I could see still being played by Felicity Jones. There'd be a love triangle between Peter, Gwen, and Black Cat. Peter's arc in this movie is that he's trying to move on from Aunt May's death, but is having a hard time. Now, apparently there also have been plans to have Tombstone appear in this movie and would have had them played by Denzel Washington. Now, apparently Spider-Man would fight Rhino at first, but then after defeating Rhino and Beetle, he is met by Venom, who turns out to be Harry, and then Harry breaks out Rhino and Beetle, or maybe even Silver Sable. And there also would have been another side villain, that being Sin Eater, as a little reference to the fact that there has been fan speculation that Deadshot was in The Dark Knight Rises. As for who I could see playing Sin Eater, I would say maybe Dick Warlock or anyone like Scott Adkins or Michael Shannon, either one. Basically, this movie would also introduce Miles Morales, who I could see being played by Jaden Smith, and I could see Idris Elba as Jefferson Davis, who would become the new police captain after Captain Stacy dies midway through. In the end, Spider-Man would defeat Venom by taking the symbiote off of him with the same bell tower, but at the end, it would seem like Spider-Man died defeating Rhino, Silver Sable, and Beetle, but more likely seemingly having died after defeating Silver Sable. Silver Sable would have been injured and would have been taken to a hospital before she could go to jail. However, the helicopter would likely kill Rhino. Now, the ending would show Miles Morales now wearing a Spider-Man mask. Miles would be older in this scene. I could see Nadia Jeter as an older Miles because it would be a time skip ending. Spider-Man would have a statue placed in the city. And Miles would swing off as he's starting off as Spider-Man. But then he would see what seems to be Peter alive and with a woman with their newborn child in a hospital. This could be Gwen Stacy. This could also be Felicia Hardy. But we never know. And then Miles swings off. And the swing scene could resemble the ending of the first movie with the final swing, as it would all come full circle. Now, Mysterio, of course, would be a side villain in the later films. There, of course, would be reports of a Miles Morales show taking place in the same universe as the Web Slinger trilogy. And there would have been an offer for a fourth movie that never got made. But since the fourth movie wasn't planned, we never know what could have happened. Though there would have been several fan ideas as to what could have been. And there would have been fan speculation over all the different villains that exist, like Kraven the Hunter, Chameleon, Kingpin, as well as Lizard and Iguana, and that's all I could think of. Now, basically, during the years, Warner Brothers would have tried to reboot the franchise again with someone like Tom Holland or KG Apa as Spider-Man in a film called The Amazing Spider-Man, which would have had him face off against Kraven the Hunter. And it likely would have been a trilogy or saga, depending on how many films there would have been. Some rumors would say it would have been a trilogy, others say it would have been a saga. Because there would have been rumors that Green Goblin, White Rabbit, Hobgoblin, Lizard, Iguana, Boomerang, Shriek, Black Cat, and many more were some of the rumored villains. And of course, it would be said that Gwen Stacy was indeed planned to make an appearance at some point, likely in the first movie, but the movie would have wound up being canceled in favor of The Amazing Spider-Man, which would be an in-development limbo reboot. I think Tom Holland could have still played Spider-Man. Black Cat would also appear and would be played by Sydney Sweeney or Anya Taylor-Joy. As for the villains, they would be Kingpin and Tombstone, played by Vincent D'Onofrio and Marvin Jones III. We also see Captain George Stacy, who I could see being played by Gary Oldman. Aunt May, who I think could have still been played by Marissa Tomei. And of course, we'd also see Chameleon and Cletus Cassidy. Cassidy would be played by Paul Dino, whereas Chameleon would be played by Newman Acer. This again would be grounded and realistic. Now, Chameleon and Cassidy would be teaming up throughout the whole film, and the Chameleon would have been a minion of the Kingpin. And of course, Cassidy and Chameleon would be stopped so Spider-Man could fight Kingpin. This would have been Tombstone's goal, to get rid of Kingpin. During the final battle, a massive flood would break out, which causes Spider-Man to have to save everyone, and Black Cat having to help. And in the end, Spider-Man does stop Kingpin, only for Aunt May to be put in a hospital and has to be there in the meantime. But Peter just hopes she's okay. Then, of course, in 2027, we'd be getting the In Development Limbo sequel. And there would have been plans for future villains in later films, like Crime Master and Doctor Octopus, as well as Molten Man. And of course, Green Goblin would also be set up thanks to the inclusion of Norman Osborn, who I could see being played by Billy Crudup. So that's what if Warner Brothers made a Spider-Man movie. This is a longer what if, but I hope you all enjoyed it. Anyways, bye.